Welcome to this episode of Rebuilding Careers. It is my honor to serve our community as Working Wardrobe CEO. My name is Bonni Pomush, and I am joined here today by the one and only Chris Porsena. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Bonni. Thank you for having me.
Chris, you and I met as you were serving on the Working Wardrobe's board of directors, and today you are sitting in a different seat. I am so looking forward to hearing more and sharing more of your journey with our listeners. But first, my favorite question I ask all of our podcast participants. How did you earn your first paycheck, Chris? How did you get the job? What did you learn doing it? What did it bring to you that maybe you're even using today?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it was cash. It wasn't a paycheck. So let's just start there.
Yeah.
But I do remember my first job was my father's auto parts store from my home country of Haiti. And for the longest, I had been asking him, I want to be at the register, and I'm there anyway, right? Like, why don't I put me to work? And so that was it. And interestingly enough, when I got the cash, he gave it to me in an envelope. He reminded me this 5 years ago. He was visiting and he brought the letter as well as the envelope. The money that I made and working for him that week, I gave it to him because he wanted to do some construction and expand. I gave it to him as my contribution to that expansion. And my dad, who's not a very expressive person, to have kept that for 30 plus years, and the actual cash and the note, that really was special. So that was the first non-check story. I'm happy to delve into my very first paycheck. Was in a great state of New Jersey. I was working as a mortgage processor at a small regional bank in New Jersey, and so it was pretty neat. I mean, it was my first foray into sort of working. I was a senior in high school, and I was working at this co-op program where I was in school for the from I don't know 8:30 to 11, and then from 11 to 5 I was working, and it felt good. I mean, it felt like I had autonomy. I had I had a lot of autonomy, pretty much, right? Like which felt good and was very different from some of my peers and classmates who were in class all day and were not making money. But it was a very pivotal moment in my sort of life, to sort of go out and do something and be independent, and to be able to not rely on my parents who were back home, right, for whatever pocket money I might have needed and what have you. So that was it.
Wow. That's also like an interesting time in life to be working on mortgages where like I would imagine that that's far in the horizon and your goals.
It was, but I'm glad you brought that up. The woman who I worked with and for, Joanne O'Day, loved her. She taught me a lot, right? I mean, the being a mortgage processor, you're kind of like an investigator, right? Like, you're
Mhm.
taking in information from applicants, and you're corroborating that, making sure that they have they meet all of the requirements, right, to apply and qualify for a loan. And the level of diligence and just being detail oriented, which I think most would say today, like I'm super diligent, and there's another choice word that I won't say here, but I think I got a lot of that from my sort of training and working with a Greater Jersey mortgage company.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a great learning experience.
Oh, I would imagine. I mean, talk about needing to be thorough and detail oriented. That is definitely how I would think of that entire industry.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, let's parlay that to today. I mean, there's some time and experiences in between that first cash and W-2 paycheck and today. how do you contribute your unique skills, your talents, your constellation that makes just you, Chris Porsena, you? How are you contributing that now?
Yeah, well, great question. I would say recently, in the last 6 or so months, I've been spending a lot of time with my family back on the East Coast, and younger cousins, and who are going through different life stages,
Mhm.
whether it be graduating. I have one who's graduating from high school, one who's graduating from college. I've been spending a lot of time with them and just talking about financial literacy and talking
Mm,
about budgeting and talking about all of the skills that perhaps are the most relevant, but I don't think there is a class or a course in their respective coursework where they're going
yeah,
through that. So
yeah.
a lot of my time has been just spending quality time with family, generally speaking, but really spending time and teaching the next generation, if I could say that. I mean, I'm dating myself, but teaching the next generation about just financial literacy, which is um, desperately important in our community. I mean, I come from I'm Haitian, a proud Haitian, and first in my family to have gone to college and graduate, and so and there was always this um, y- you know I had the reputation of being, super, like if I had put my mind towards something, I was going to do it and I would not deviate. And I was, back to the point of detail oriented and, and I would budget like I used to be in Chipotle a lot. And so like I would reward myself like, once a week and go to Chipotle. But all of those were in spreadsheets and they were like, that's wild. I mean, why
Yeah,
don't you have Chipotle
yeah.
twice a week? But that sort of discipline and diligence, just teaching that to the next generation
Mhm,
is something that I've gained tremendous energy
mhm,
from doing,
mhm.
and it's very fulfilling.
Well, it's also so taboo, right? Like to talk about money is not a American culture, apropos thing to do and bring up. And yet it is the thing we spend the most time on, isn't
Yeah,
it? Like to make the money, to spend the money, to get the guac.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
That also sounds to me, Chris, like you are so driven by the goal and so comfortable with the delayed gratification, or maybe comfortable is not the right word, but willing to endure to get to all the rows and columns on that spreadsheet, head to somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it was coming out of college, uh, I think my third year in college, I was able to sort of save up and bought my first piece of real estate. And so you're spot on in that, that discipline and that diligence was for something, was working towards a goal. At the time, I didn't know what it was for,
Mm,
but being in that environment from my very first job, and senior in high school, and I kept working there while I was in college and I was commuting. And before I graduated, being in that environment and seeing that, oh wow, I mean, one could do that, and it could serve two purposes. One, you're providing something that is much needed in our communities, but also, right, like you're creating something that you could pass on, right, to your family. And so um I didn't know the saving and being diligent about or disciplined about the one Chipotle a week would get me to that, but it was a definite life milestone for me to be able to do that at a very young age.
mhm. Also, I think that that's um, at that age in our brain development and that age and stage of life, it is not typical
Mm,
for a person of that age and stage in life to be able and willing to work toward a very long-term delayed gratification
yeah.
type of goal. Um, there's something that's saying to me, though, that with all that discipline, with all of that goal drivenness and ambition, with that clarity of, I know what I am trying to build,
Mm,
that you have not done that without obstacles, without things getting in your way. Many all of the working wardrobes clients that we are reaching are overcoming usually more than one barrier, more than one obstacle at a time. I think hearing other people's experience of what was the obstacle and how did you move around it? How did you get over it? How did you make it irrelevant? Inspires not just me, but all of us to see our humanness, and that, we tell stories about people in our heads and we make assumptions about what that means, what they've been through, what they know, and maybe what that trajectory actually was like is completely different than the story that we're making up. Chris, would you be so bold to share with us an example of, or maybe it's more than one, and maybe it's a constellation of barriers, of obstacles that you've overcome? Like what were they? How did you approach it? What happened? How
Yeah.
did you get through it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a how much time do we have, Bonnie? I mean, there are a few. But I think the headline is, I was able to overcome them, not alone. But I'll dig into that.
Mhm.
I think the very first one is um y- being raised in a different country and coming here where English was not my first language, right? That's not what was spoken in the home. And coming here at the age of 15, where it was uh, you're going through you're like finding out yourself, and how do you fit in, and so doing so in a country where I had to leave home. My parents were not around. I was with my aunt and my uncle, and not having the language. So that was one of the very first obstacles that I would say, just assimilating to a new environment, when language was a barrier, and just overall, like, how do you behave? I mean, I remember one of the, it was sort of an embarrassing moment, but one that I'm proud to sort of share is, I was in class and the instructor sort of walked into the class, and I sort of stood up, and everyone was looking at me and making fun of me and was saying like, what are you doing? And back home, that was sort of the way that you showed respect to your elders and the instructors and what have you. And I remember that sort of just sticking with me, like, oh, I was looking for kindness and I was looking to fit in and assimilate, but I didn't get that, which, to no fault of, I mean, 14, 15-year-old. I mean, they're just like, oh, just making fun of the new guy who, is doing everything to not follow, how we operate here. So that was one. That was one. The other one is, that comes to mind is around the imposter syndrome, which, for a variety of reason, in a lot of the spaces that I've chosen to operate in from a professional standpoint, I'm either the youngest. I'm either the one person that looks like me, and so there is always this sort of question, of, am I good enough? And even if I know that, technically speaking, right, I know I I will. I won't say I will outwork anyone, but I will try. So there's a lot of discipline there, and hard working, and also, technically speaking. But I always doubted myself, right? I always, um, would think twice, thrice, four times before sort of acting on certain things, right? Or making a decision, because it was um it was always under there was sort of the shadow of, okay, you're going to be judged for it. You are probably not going to get the accolades because of one of those factors. And so that was something that, I don't know if I've overcome it. I'm still working through it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm certainly aware, and I have a name for it, and I try to check that, at the door, whatever it is that I'm sort of embarking on. I try to check that out the door. Like, yes, maybe you are venturing in a space that you haven't been before, or put all those things aside, leap in, like, take that leap of faith. And also, don't go at it alone, right? I mean, I think that's the other piece is, um, a lot of times, we sort of try to navigate, through life and through whatever the challenges are on our own. I recognize that, I have the privilege of, having I'm a mama's boy, so my mom, like I will call my mom for whatever it is, right? And to this day, I don't think she knows exactly what I did for a living, in consulting, but she always sort of told me to sort of, like follow your heart. And we're very faith based, and so just pray on it. But you have your village that is behind you. Whatever you do, you can do no wrong. Like, we will support you, and when you fail at whatever it is, right? Because there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the failures. We still love you, and we still think that you can do no wrong. And so that was something that came much later in life, where we had sort of that fluidity in our conversation and vulnerability to sort of go to her and have those types of conversation. But it was really important and instrumental in overcoming a lot of the barriers. I mean, to um, being one of the youngest partner at my firm, to being to make it from partner to senior partner in the shortest amount of time. I mean, I think there are a lot of firsts for me. But even across all of those sort of milestones, or navigating through those, there were challenges along the way. And even as they were happening, I would be doubting myself and saying, is that a mistake? Like, why? Why? But I think having a solid family foundation, and reaching out and tapping into the folks who are in your life, right? Like, that's important. Being self-aware as it relates to whatever it might be. For me, it was um, the imposter syndrome. For others, it may be other things. Just naming it, being aware of it. You can't really manage it or navigate through it if you don't name it, right? Yeah. And so naming it, I think, were some of the ways that I was able to navigate through some of those obstacles.
Oh man, what you're saying, Chris, is hitting home really hard with me. I think that doubting oneself, and especially as you described it, like being the youngest, being the only, like whatever it is, there's like a script that happens in my head about like all the things that I should be concerned about. And even though that voice is loud, I'm getting more and more aware that a lot of other people have the same thing going on. And so that has been blowing my mind a bit, because it's like, oh, we're all just a bunch of adults running around in these adult bodies, but we have these sort of that's kind of been a bit of an equalizer for me. This other piece that you mentioned, which is the asking for help, I struggle with this in all aspects of my life, and I I think it's also why I have the greatest respect and admiration for clients at Working Wardrobes, because I think about how vulnerable and how courageous it is to seek help. Yeah. And to be, from this position, if you will, in the place of wanting to help and creating. I mean, we work really hard to create the space and the place for people to say, I need help, and for us to embrace with that warmth and love and care that we are here to help you. Um, that feels really good, but it doesn't make the asking for help easier. I've been in rooms where people have asked, when someone's asked you for help, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Chris, when someone asks you for help, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
When someone asks me that, I mean, they really need it, because a lot of the folks who around me won't ask for the help, right? And so if you muster up enough courage, it's like, yeah, they really need it.
Right? And my response is always, yes, how can I help? Happy to, because I'm doing that same thing that you just did, which is like, wow, you asked. Absolutely. And if it can't be me, I'm going to find a way. Yep, exactly, to resource it. Thank you so much for naming it. and talking about it, especially from a position of being so ambitious and achieving so much. To know that that's also present for you
Yeah.
is breaking down a barrier. I know for me, and I'm sure for other listeners. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So you made a little comment that sounds like you're rebuilding your career, that you are going in a different direction. Would you share, under the understanding that most people are in some stage of this, and it can be different, all of us, but in what way are you approaching rebuilding your career that might help other people as they're rebuilding theirs?
I think in the very first way is it doesn't have to be what it was or what you think it ought to be.
Ooh,
So, and I'll try and maybe say that again. Like, it
yeah.
doesn't have to be what you think it was, or right, what you think it ought to be. So, um, it undoubtedly life circumstances will happen where the decision is not yours. Like, you are having to rebuild because something happened, right? Like, there is a transition or a shift and what have you, and you have to. And other times it may be you self-selected into going down a different path. I think the second one is probably less common because we are, I feel, right, like very sort of programmed to sort of just stay on a linear path. And I think the thing to keep in mind is um, it's okay to diverge from that, one, and two, if it's not a decision, if the decision is outside of your hand, when you're presented with that, that is an opportunity. Lean into the opportunity, and again, if it's something that is available to you, tap into your resources, your network, right? To sort of figure out, how am I going to embark and embrace this new opportunity, which in and of itself will have some challenges, right? And so for me, that's one of the ways that I've been able to sort of say, hey, I have this sort of, a passion for, small businesses, or I have a passion for different arenas of my life that for the better part of 20 years, right, I have not necessarily leaned into it. I haven't necessarily, um, sought out opportunities to sort of go in a different direction. And I am making a deliberate sort of decision to um, be be moved in whatever that direction is going to be. And so some of the things that I'm doing is I'm a big believer in being a continuous learner, right? And I think I'm sort of and I've enrolled into a different coursework, and I'm reading a ton of books. Thank you for some of your recommendations.
My pleasure.
And that's sort of one of the ways where you're broadening, right, your sphere, if you will, right? And you are, going down a path that, again, it doesn't have to be this linear path if you don't want it to be, right? So I would say that's one way that I've sort of tried. Another thing that I'm doing to sort of help in rebuilding my career is I'm naming exactly what I want, and I'm holding myself accountable, and I'm sharing it with those who are willing to listen, right? My family, like, and I want them to hold me accountable, because oftentimes what I did for 20 years, or what I've seen, other friends and what have you have navigated through, is you have an idea, right? Or you have a dream even, and you never really lean in and go and pursue it, because you think it's either too big, or you think that you keep it to yourself, and so no one is holding you accountable. Hey, didn't you say you wanted to be, I don't know, whatever it is? But if you name it, you're holding yourself accountable, and you're making sure that your inner circle, right, your friends and your family are aware of it, and they not only are they holding you accountable, but they can be that support, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they can be
Yeah.
that support and that help that you need, but you don't know if you don't ask. One of the
Mhm.
great lessons that Joanne, who was my very first paycheck, taught me is that you don't ask, you don't get, right? And I know it can be hard, right? Because it can be very humbling. It could be it's not the way that it was done. It's not you can be embarrassed, whatever it might
Mhm.
be. But I feel as though once you kind of get over those hurdles, no one has been able to navigate a transition, a shift, rebuilding by doing it alone. And so that to me is the key, right? Is to
Mhm.
certainly tap into your network.
I'm aware that I'm physically uncomfortable as you're talking about this because it is uncomfortable to admit our dreams and
Mm,
to let them have wings, right? To let them be out there because it's what you described. The accountability, I think, is where the fear comes in. And it's
mhm.
like that I have this dream that I want to pursue it. And then you, as you described, you might put obstacles in your own way or not
Yes.
allow it to flourish. And
Yes.
um, I think that from a very spiritual perspective, part of me is wondering that that didn't come from nowhere. That dream, it's part, I think, of our purpose and
Hmm.
its expression in the world. And at Working Wardrobes, we believe every person has purpose. That like you arrived to this planet with like a mission, that you have something to give, that there's something unique about the constellation that makes you you, that has purpose to be channeled and harnessed and honed. And I think part of living that purpose is those inconvenient, uncomfortable,
Mm.
big, whopping dreams. And I accolade you for pursuing them with courage. And as you said, not alone. This is, I think, also part of the core human experience that our American culture doesn't really pay a lot of homage to, right? We're
Yeah.
all about the independence and launch and go off on your own, you go.
Right.
And
Right.
instead, we are a interwoven collective that is not able to be disconnected. I mean, we
Mm.
can pretend to all we want, but there's no way you can separate yourself from all other people. Like
Yeah.
we're constantly creating ripple effects and connection. So I would imagine that in pursuit of your dream and your purpose, that not only will those connections serve it well, but that will also fulfill part of their purpose.
Yeah.
As you reflected, Chris, you talked about, over the last 20 years, right? And I'm thinking back to that 15-year-old that came to the US.
Hmm.
If you could impart to your younger self, and maybe it's the 15-year-old, maybe it's younger, maybe it's older, what might you say to him that you know now that
Mm.
you wish that he would know?
That's a great question. I would probably tell my younger self that it's going to be okay, right? I mean, I one of the things that I didn't, I guess, you know, address, but like there's a lot of self-doubt, right? And I guess it's very tightly connected with, the imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Um, and I would tell him to persevere and it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I would also probably say, don't don't live somebody else's dream, right? Um, be steadfast in knowing what your dream is, and pursue it with every ounce of your fiber of your being,
Mm.
with all of the energy. So that's probably what I would say to my younger self.
I can't help but just think like, what would be possible? Where would you be now? Right? That's an interesting curiosity to go unanswered. I mean, really, you're.
I mean, I can hint at. I mean, I really wanted to be like a musician, right?
Ooh.
And I still think I am, in the privacy of my own home. But yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. But yes, I do think that definitely um, do not live anybody else's dream. Like, know what yours is and pursue it.
And pursue it. Yeah. Well, similar, but a little bit different. As we close out this episode of Rebuilding Careers, I love to always share just parting words of wisdom. I think that we collect through books, through conversation, through life experiences, pieces that really speak to us. And it might just be this moment right now that this message is coming to you that is in something that you're exposed to, or maybe it's something bigger. But as we prepare to part, what are your parting words of wisdom, Chris?
I will quote George Bernard Shaw, and I think it goes, I'm paraphrasing, it goes something to the effect of there will be lots of life circumstances, right? And don't just rest on life circumstances when they come at you. You sort of go back at it, right? And reach in, tap in to ask for help and go forward.
Hmm. Reach in. Love that. Chris Porsena, it has been such an honor to have you on the Rebuilding Careers podcast. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your journey, your strength, your experience with all of us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing, you and your amazing team are doing at Working Wardrobe.
Oh, it's such an honor. That's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in.